okay, in terms of psychiatric issues, does have a higher frequency in those patients who have suffered from trauma, including intimate partner violence.
You've never...
And I'm part of that book.
Okay. Temporal mandibular disease deals with problems with the jaw. What is
temporal mandibular disease problem with oral issues? Yeah, but there are many patients who complain of oral issues where the oral surgeon cannot find a reason for it, and the reason why they can't is because people who have suffered from trauma and intimate partner violence are prone to increased sensitivity of somatic sensations, which can manifest in temporal mandibular disease. Thank you, I appreciate that. Nice plug for my book, Chief. Thank you.
I didn't hear it, but there we go. So, you haven't written any chapters of any books specifically about IPV.
Again, I think I've gone over that. I've written 2 articles on that, and I've written parts of chapters. And dissociative identity disorder, I should add what I did write a chapter on, is completely based on trauma and intimate partner violence.
Right. I'm not asking you about trauma because you want to talk about trauma. I'm asking you about IPV specifically.
I will reiterate again, you cannot separate intimate partner violence and say that is a separate rubric aside from trauma. Trauma is overall. Intimate partner violence is part of trauma. And the answer to the question is, any individual who suffers from a dissociative disorder, which I am the author of a chapter of, suffers from trauma, whether it be at the hands of childhood or be at the hands of an intimate partner.
Right, but you've already testified that half your practice is trauma and a subset of that practice is IPV, correct?
Which is actually the national average patients. About 20% of patients suffer from it, and that's about my practice number.
Except you're discounting the fact that half your practice is not trauma at all. So 10% of your practice is IPV.
I don't know if the numbers add up exactly like that.
I'm just using yours.
I don't know if I'm doing, I don't know if those numbers add up like that, because I'm not sure if that's the case. If you say 25%, then maybe 12.5% of my practice. That's being rather specific. So again, a significant number of my patients have suffered from intimate partner violence. I see it on a daily basis, and I'm not sure exactly why I'm getting asked the same question again.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
You listed 60 references to articles. I guess you said 80 now, and publications.
And I said around, sorry, I said around 80. I said around 80.
60, 80, whatever it is, right?
No, 60 and 80 is not. If you go to the PubMed app, you go to PubMed right now and Google, put PubMed Spiegel DR, and you'll find that number is 72 with 2 waiting to be impressed. 1 submitted, so that'd be 75. So it's at around 80. So again, what's on my CV is not necessarily the most updated version, because I still publish since the CV's been given to you, sir.
Right. And not one of the 72, 80 articles has IPV in the title, right?
Correct. Not one of them has IPV. It does have trauma, but not IPV.
Right. And you've never presented on the topic of IPV specifically?
As a function of trauma and as a function of somatic illness, again, I would say to you that it's part and parcel of these illnesses. So the answer is yes, I have. Okay? The answer is yes, I have.
And IPV doesn't appear in your CV at all.
If you say it's not in my CV, I will believe you. There's a lot of things that are not in my CV that I do.
And you're not associated with any professional literature on IPV.
I'm sorry, repeat the question, sir?
Is there any professional literature that you've contributed to relative to IPV specifically as opposed to trauma generally?
The answer to the question again, sir, is that you cannot separate this artificial separation you are trying to do between trauma and intimate partner violence. It is part and parcel of trauma. We don't thread it like that.
Your Honor, plaintiff would accept this witness as an expert on general psychiatry, but and with respect to the drug usage issues that Ms. Brennehoff referenced, but not with respect to IPV.
All right, over objection, he's in it as an expert, as stated on the record. All right, you may continue. Thank you.
Dr. Spiegel, at our request, what have you reviewed in this case? And just go ahead and give me
So it's a lengthy route, but court filings, psychological testing that was done on Ms. Heard by both Dr. Hughes and Dr. Curry. Other physicians, medical records, other physicians, Dr. Kipper, counselors and therapists that both parties and psychiatrists that they went to, text messages, depositions, snippets of the UK trial, and I'm sure pictures of physical injuries, so I've seen a lot.
What, if anything, have you seen in terms of emails, audios, videos?
Yes, so I've seen videos of Mr. Depp. I think the video was shown, right, of Mr. Depp destroying, slamming cupboards and breaking glass and yelling at Ms. Heard while having a wine glass, his wine in his hands. I've seen videos of destruction of property in the house.
Okay. And what, if any, review have you conducted of the deposition and testimony of Mr. Depp's hired witness, Dr. Curry?
Objection.
Sure. Do you remember my question? Did you review the deposition testimony of Dr. Curry?
Dr.
Curry.
Yes, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, so I reviewed testimony of Dr. Curry. I reviewed Dr. Curry's reports. I reviewed Dr. Curry's testimony.
Okay, and what if, did you review the deposition and trial testimony of Dr. Hughes?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor, beyond the scope of the disclosure.
I'll allow that.
Thank you. All right, overruled. Did you interview Mr. Depp?
No, I did not.
Did you request to
I
interview?
requested to interview Mr. Depp twice, and both times Mr. Depp and his lawyers refused.
Dr. Spiegel, I'm going to ask you some questions in this case respecting your opinions and the opinions you have formed and the basis for them. And I'm going to ask you to provide me with, in a reasonable degree of medical probability or certainty. Can you do that?
Yes.
Okay. On what were you requested to analyze and opine in this case?
So it's fourfold. One, I was asked to opine about the risk factors that are associated with intimate partner violence and behaviors that are shown, risk factors that are shown in intimate partner violence to be consistent with behaviors that Mr. Depp has demonstrated. Two, I've been asked to opine about the acute effects on alcohol and substance use, and I mentioned that including mood, behavior, cognition, functional impairment. Three, talking about the psychological profile, if you would, of, is there a question? I'm sorry. Oh,
No.
Okay. Of psychological and medical sequelae of patients who have suffered intimate partner violence and perpetrated intimate partner violence, and whether or not Mr. Depp's behavior is consistent with that. And lastly, about alcohol and other substance use disorders, their diagnostic criteria, their medical and psychological effects, psychiatric effects, their cognitive effects, and their functional effects. And I think I would like to just go to one other thing. When we talk about, when psychiatry talks about substance use disorders, it's imperative to understand we're not talking about someone who rarely uses and happens to have a bad night. We're not talking about someone who uses on a weekly basis and has a bad night. We're talking about repetitive patterns of behavior that meet a list of 11 criteria that can be deemed mild, moderate, or severe. Because I think people get confused when they hear the word substance abuse, that they think of, oh, I may abuse this because I use it twice. There is a whole criteria of behavior and sequelae and consequences that go with a substance use disorder. I'm not just talking about someone who will occasionally smoke a joint or smokes a joint or snorts occasionally coke, okay, or has alcohol on weekends. So I really need to reiterate that, because I think when you look at psychiatric behavior, we tend to people look online and say, my gosh, I have all 7 of these, right? And they're reading it not quite the way the psychiatric literature is supposed to go. So please, what I'm talking about is I need you to understand, one, that's what's going on. As I told you about intimate partner violence, it's horrible that anyone would strike anyone, okay? But again, we're talking about repetitive behaviors from means of control, right? So that's real important to understand when you're moving forward. And I made a list of medications do help. Although I will also tell you on review, I will tell you what that included. That both times he said that he functioned better and that he recognized that alcohol and drugs was at the root of his problems.
Now, there's been testimony that Mr. Depp is quite charming, both off and on the drugs and the alcohol. What is your answer to that?
So, again, let me put one thing clear here. I'm not here to impeach Mr. Depp's acting skills or his persona. He has way greater skills than I do in that. What I'm here to say is talk about how drugs and alcohol affect what we all have in common. We're all human beings. We can all only get so much, take so much when something is going to happen. And that's what I see every day in the emergency room, on the consult service, and inpatient psychiatry. Bad things happen, not because of anything special, except we're all human beings, and our brain, substance abuse are not titrated, they're not regulated by the FDA. We don't know what we're getting, we don't know how much we're getting. There is no control over what makes it to our brain. So it is not the actor, it is not the persona, okay? It is a person just like the rest of us who are human beings who will have these effects, and that's what we all share in common. Everyone in this courtroom shares that in common.
When Mr. Depp was in his relationship with Amber Heard, was he a polysubstance abuser?
What substance abuse?
Polysubstance
Yes.
abuser?
So
Can you explain what that is?
overruled.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
go
Okay,
ahead.
so polysubstance abuse is the use of 3 or more substances. And it's like I said, concurrently, he was. Even while I was getting ready for rehab on the island, he was. So, yes, he did engage in that.
Did Mr. Depp's drug and alcohol abuse affect him cognitively?
Yes. So, if nothing else to look at, Dr. Blaustein, a psychiatrist that evaluated Mr. Depp, did a mini mental state exam on him. And as part of that mini mental state examination, you're asked to remember 3 words and then come back 5 minutes later and repeat those 3 words. And in the meanwhile, you're getting other types of testing for attention and concentration and visual, spatial, and language. So other things that are being tested too. Mr. Depp was unable to recall any of them, and that is very unusual for a 50-ish year old male. I don't remember how old he was when he took that. Generally speaking, that age group should be remembering 2 or all 3 of those words. One, I do know that his lines were also fed to him by earpiece. Again, affecting memory. I did see video deposition about having to have questions. I don't want to say repeat as much as completely forgotten. So,
Okay.